right, hello everyone, good evening, how are you? So for those of you who are joining for the first time, my name is Janetta. I am an American who currently teaches English here in Brazil at Seed Idiomas in Caratinga. I want to welcome you all for joining our class this evening. It's really important that during our class that you participate and interact. I'm going to be explaining grammar tonight about modal verbs. If you have any questions, feel free to leave some comments in the chat section and I'll be able to address them for you throughout the presentation and throughout the class. If you have a book available to take some notes, feel free to take some notes. I will send the presentation that I'm going to be giving today. It will be available later on this evening in the Telegram group. We'll send you the link later on if you're not already a member of our group, as well as some associated homework. All right, so welcome everybody. Hello to Gabriel, Allison, Ana Lara, Josie, Julio, Tatiana, Samuel. Very good. All right, I'm happy to see some repeating faces every time we have class. It's really nice that you guys really stick with it and are really continuing to better yourself during this quarantine. All right, so let's look here. Hello, Lizandra, Lara, welcome. All right, everyone. So, tonight's topic that we're going to be discussing is modal verbs, okay? So throughout the presentation, I'm going to be explaining the different ways that we use modal verbs, what are some common modal verbs, as well as asking some questions to get you to interact and participate in the conversation so that you can practice using modal verbs as well. So let's look here. When exactly do we use modal verbs? Now, we can use modal verbs to talk about 5 different things. We use them to talk about probability, ability, obligations and advice, permission, and habits. So we can use modal verbs to talk about all of these 5 things. Now, these 5 things we can use to talk about things that are happening right now in the present, as well as things that happened in the past. And we'll be going over exactly how we'll use modal verbs in each of these examples. All right, so how are modal verbs different? Now, modal verbs, you'll see, will act different than our normal verbs. For example, when we use modal verbs, they have no S in the third person singular. For example, he, she, it. Usually when we talk in the third person singular, with he, she, it, we always add S to the end of the verb. For example, she likes to eat pizza, all right? Or she eats pizza every day. So with modal verbs, we don't add S in the third person. So when we use he, she, or it, the modal verb stays the same. There is no S. For example, I can say, she might go to class. Now, when I say might, it means maybe yes, maybe no, we're not sure. Now, most modal verbs, except for ought, are followed by a verb without to. Now, usually with most verbs, we see when we have 2 verbs back to back, then we use to. For example, I like to eat pizza. All right, so we have like is our first verb, and eat is the second verb. But when we have two verbs back to back, we need the infinitive, so we use to. However, with modal verbs, except for ought is the only exception. But with most modal verbs, we do not use the infinitive with to. For example, we should, which is my modal verb, should. We should build a new computer center. So here we have our two verbs back to back. We have our modal verb should, but then we also have build. So you'll see that in these examples with our modal verbs, we don't say we should to build a new computer center. We just say we should build a new computer center. All right, so modal verbs have no infinitive like we just saw in the previous example, or ing form. For example, my teacher can sing very well. We don't say my teacher can sing very well. So after the modal verb, we don't use verb with ing, just the verb in the base. Now, also with modal verbs, you'll see that they make questions and negative forms without using do or did. So usually when we make a question in the present, we use do. Or if we're talking about the negative, then we use don't. But same thing with the past. For example, we use did for questions and didn't for the negatives. However, with modal verbs, we don't use do or did. So an example of a question you might see would be, may I see that please? So we don't say do may I see that or did may I see that, okay? We just use the modal verb. You don't need to use do or did. Same thing in the negative. You mustn't shout, all right? So we don't say you mustn't shout or you mustn't shout, all right? So we just use you with the negative form, or you or any subject, with the negative form of the modal verb, but we don't need to use do, don't, or didn't in the negative. All right, hello Danielle, hello Jonas, welcome. Allison asks, teacher, what's the difference between everyone and everybody? Starting with a question. So using everyone and everybody, it's really the same thing. It's just more of a preference. Some regions use everyone, other regions use everybody. I think everybody is a little bit more formal than everyone, but you can use either one. They're both correct. There's not a main difference. All right, so let's look here. Some common modal verbs. So some of the common modal verbs, here we have 10 examples of modal verbs that we most commonly use. So here we have can, could, may, might, shall, should, will, would, must, and ought to. So let's take a look at our first example. Using moment in the past is happening now in the present or will happen in the future. Okay, so here we have a little chart on the bottom right of the screen. We can see that there are different levels of probability. So almost certain, the top level, from going from almost certain to very uncertain, we would use must to talk about almost certain, then will, would, ought to, should, can, could, may, and then might. So most would be almost certain. whereas might would be very uncertain. And we'll go over some examples of using each of these different types of probability modal verbs. Now, here we have the probability modal verbs must, might, could, may, or can't. For example, she must be on the bus. So, for example, I can say that I tried to call my sister, but she didn't answer the phone and her cell phone doesn't have service. So, she must be on the bus. When we use must in this example, it means that I'm fairly certain or I'm fairly sure that she's on the bus. This is a good guess, all right? It's very likely. I can say that she might come soon. So, maybe. Maybe yes, she'll come soon, or maybe no, she'll arrive a little bit late. All right? She could be lost. So let's say that the time passed for my sister to arrive. And I'm looking at the time and say, she could be lost. Maybe. All right? So in this example, could means maybe. Also, I can say she may be in the wrong room. So for example, if I'm waiting for my sister in a doctor's office and I can't find her, so she may be in the wrong room, all right? So maybe she's in the wrong room, or maybe she didn't arrive yet. It's a possibility, may. Now, I can say that she can't be at home. Here we use can't to mean that I'm fairly sure that this isn't true, because I'm fairly sure that she left at the correct time, so she can't be at home. She must be on her way. Now, we know that we are all facing this pandemic of COVID-19, of the coronavirus here and throughout the world. Now, I want you to tell me, using these different levels of probability, must, will, would, ought to, should, can, could, may, might, when do you think the pandemic might end? All right, so I want you to tell me, when do you think the COVID-19 pandemic might end? Let's focus on Brazil, because to focus on the whole world, it's very, very big and there's a lot going on. The events are happening at different times. But if we focus solely on Brazil, when do you think the COVID-19 pandemic might end? Can you make a complete sentence using might to talk about this? Let's see some comments. All right, so let's look here. What are some thoughts? When do you think the COVID-19 pandemic might end? For example, do you think it might end now in April? Or do you think it might end a year from now? Do you think it might end next week, next month? What do you think? Let's see some comments. Isabel says, I think COVID-19 might end at July. Good. So remember that when we're talking about months, we use in as the preposition. So it would be, I think the COVID-19 pandemic might end in July. Good. Max says the pandemic might end in the end of July. Very good. Excellent. Wagner says, I believe that the pandemic might end in the end of June. All right, so a lot of you are thinking that we still have a long time to go before we see the end of this. Lara says it might end in August. Lysandra might end in June. Good. All right, excellent. So just remember that we use in when we're talking about months, okay? But yes, a lot of you guys think that it's going to be still a few more months, right, of this sort of quarantine, as well as trying to control this pandemic of COVID-19. Might end in May. Josie says early September. Tatiana says not a very long time. But let's cross our fingers and hope that we get this resolved quickly and everything goes back to normal as soon as possible. Now let's look here. We also saw on our list of probability that we can use will or won't to talk about probability. So we use will and won't when we are very sure. All right, so we saw in the levels of certainty that will was very high on the list. Now the negative form of will is won't. So I can say she will be at work. She won't be at home. So I'm very sure, for example, my mother left the house today at 8 o'clock. It takes half hour to get to her job and it's now 9 o'clock. So I know that she will be at work. Right now, if I call my mother, she will be at work and she won't be home. Now, what is something that you will or won't do next year? For example, next year I will travel to the United States with my son for the first time. What is something that you will do next year? Something that is very probable to happen. Let's see some comments. So what is something that you will, that you're very, very certain you will do next year, or something that you're certain that you won't do next year? For example, I won't go to Argentina. It's very, 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 very unlikely that this is going to happen. Max says, Janetta, if I use think plus might, is it a pleonasm once might is already something that I am guessing about? If I use think plus might, is it a pleonasm once might is something that I'm guessing about? I don't understand your question. Using think and might together, can you try to clarify for me? Let's see. Josie says, I will travel to Porto Seguro. Good. Lizandra says, I will travel to Santiago with some friends next year. Ah, very nice. Excellent. Traveling is always a good thing. What else do you guys think? I will be older next year. Yes, Samuel, right? We don't have a way to go back in time. So every year we're getting older and older and older. Very good. Excellent. So I had to look up what this word is, this pleonasmo. So pleonasmo in English is pleonasm, and it means to use more words than are necessary to convey a message, either as a fault of style or as an emphasis. All right, let's see here. Edgar says, I won't go to China next year. Yes, going to try to avoid that. Good. Isabel says, next year I will study in January because of the coronavirus. Good. Excellent. All right, good examples, guys. Oh, Max, I'm going to continue along with this presentation. And then after, send me a message on Telegram to try to explain exactly what you are asking, because I'm getting a little bit confused and I don't have the answer for you right now. But when I better understand your question, I'll be able to get back to you, okay? Tatiana says, next year I will move house. Ah, so you will move to a new house. Very good. Excellent. Is it okay to use I think, it might, may, da da da? Yes, okay, all right, now I got you, Max. Okay, yes, so you can use I think with might or may to talk about probability. For example, I think it may be expensive to buy tickets next year to go to America because the dollar will be very high. So I can say that it is a very high probability, and it's my opinion. So I can say, I think it may be very expensive to travel to the United States next year. Or I can say, I think it might rain tomorrow. But yes, you're correct. So you can use I think when you really want to emphasize your opinion with using may or might. Good. And you can use it with other modal verbs too. For example, here we have should. So we can use it with should as well. For example, I think you shouldn't smoke. Or I think you should eat healthier food. So yes, when we want to really stress our opinion and make it known that it's something that you feel, that it's your opinion, then we can use I think before the modal verb. Good. All right, so let's look here using should and shouldn't. So we saw should on the scale of probability, and the negative form is shouldn't. So we can use should and shouldn't to make an assumption about what is probably true, if everything is as we expect. For example, they should be there by now. So let's say that they left the house at 8 o'clock and it takes a half hour to get there. And it's now 9 o'clock. So they should be there by now. If they didn't have any problems, any traffic, they should be there by now. Or I can say it shouldn't take long to drive here. So based on the traffic, I think it shouldn't take long to drive there. This use of should isn't usually used in negative events. Instead, it's a better idea to use will. For example, the underground will be very busy right now. We don't say the underground should be very busy right now. Now, what should you eat tonight? I want you to tell me. If I say that I want you to eat a healthy meal, what should you eat tonight? Let's see some things here. So, for example, if I'm going to make a healthy meal tonight for dinner, what should I eat? I should eat a well-balanced meal. So I should have my meat, I should have my carbs. So for example, maybe some rice, I should have some vegetables, so maybe some broccoli. I should have some fruit, so maybe I will have some mangoes. So what should you eat tonight? Samuel says, I should eat pizza because I like it. Ah, Samuel, very good. Pizza is always a good option, right? Excellent. What else do you guys think? What are some things that you should eat tonight? Samuel, do you have a specific kind of pizza that you like to eat? I'll tell you a fun fact. The pizza in Brazil is very, very, very different from the pizza in the United States. Here in Brazil, when you have pizza, they put so many ingredients on the top of the pizza. And I was very surprised. And another very strange thing that we see when we come to Brazil, when foreigners come to Brazil, is that you eat pizza with a fork and a knife. In the United States, you would never see somebody eat pizza with a fork and a knife. Everybody just lifts it up with their hand and eats it. But I think it's because we don't put so many different toppings on the top, so then the pizza's lighter, and then you can eat it with your hands without losing all the pieces and not everything falling. Lasagna says, I think I should eat a big hamburger tonight. I should eat nothing because I'm doing intermittent fasting. Tatiana, you're always so fit and always so healthy. Very good. Isabella says, I should eat some vegetarian burgers. Good. Isabel, remember that when we use some when it's something that's plural. So for example, I should eat some vegetarian burgers with S. Or I can say, if you just want to talk about one burger, you can say that I should eat a vegetarian burger. But good, very good examples, guys. Now, what is something that you shouldn't do? No. What is something that you shouldn't do? Let's say that when you are a child, let's say, or a teenager, and then your parents tell you, you shouldn't do this. What is something that you shouldn't do? Max says, I should have a salad tonight, but I will probably eat junk food. Max, life's a difficult balance, but I understand. I shouldn't eat anything heavy tonight. Anna says, good example. Anna, I should eat a hot soup. Good job, Laura. I had a hot soup for dinner tonight, actually myself. Because today is a little bit cold outside tonight. So, what is something that you shouldn't do? Imagine back to your teenage years, your childhood. What is something that your parents always told you that you shouldn't do? For example, my parents always told me that you shouldn't get in a car with a stranger. All right? Next says that a way to avoid COVID-19 is by using a fork and a knife. Very true, exactly, right? A way to prevent this extra piece of contact with the pizza is using your fork and your knife. Very true. Josie says, I shouldn't to smoke. Good example, Josie. Now remember, after shouldn't, we just put the verb in the base. No infinitive, so no to. So it would be, I shouldn't smoke. All right, good. What else is something? For example, you shouldn't drive when you had 2 beers to drink. So shouldn't drive. I shouldn't forget that call my father. Good example, Waldner. So we would say, I shouldn't forget to call my father. Good. I shouldn't miss this class. Good, Samuel. Yes, I'm happy you didn't miss this class. I shouldn't arrive at home so late. Good. Excellent. Good examples, guys. Now, let's look at can. So, we use can for something that is generally possible, something we know sometimes happen. For example, prices can be high in London. So depending upon the fluctuation of the pound, prices can be high or low in London. Now, can is not used to talk about specific possibilities. Instead, we use could. So, when we're talking about something specific, I can say he could be on the bus, not he can be on the bus. Max says, I shouldn't stay at home only eating and watching TV shows. Ah, yes, Max. It's something that we shouldn't do, but during the quarantine, it's one of the best things, right? Now, we can also use can and could to talk about the ability to do something. So, when we are talking about a skill or an ability, we use can or could. For example, she can speak 6 languages. Now, if we want to talk in the past, we use could. My grandfather could play golf very well. All right, so maybe in the past he was very good at playing golf, but now he's 90 years old, so he's not good anymore. All right, I can say, if we're talking in the present, the negative, I can't drive. So like I told you guys the other class, I can't drive manual car. I can only drive automatic. And if I wanted to talk in the past, I can say I couldn't speak Portuguese until I moved to Brazil. Now, I want you to tell me, what is something that you can do now that you couldn't do in the past? Now, I like this quote from Walt Disney, a very inspirational man. If you can dream it, you can do it. It's very nice, right? Now, what is something that you can do now that you couldn't do in the past? For example, I can speak Portuguese now, but I couldn't speak Portuguese 3 years ago when I moved to Brazil. So I want you to tell me, what is something that you can do now that you couldn't do in the past? Let's see some comments. Josie says, I can understand Americans' movies. Very good. Excellent, Josie. So you can understand American movies better now than you could in the past. Good. I couldn't whistle, but now I can do it. Good example, Laura. Excellent. Oh, whistling is very difficult. I can whistle normally, like... Okay, no problem. But you know how some people whistle with their fingers like that? I can't do this. What else? What are some other examples of things that you can do now that you couldn't do in the past? Like Josie said that she can understand American movies. So this is really something nice that you guys can really do in your free time, especially during the quarantine, is to watch some movies in English using Netflix or online on YouTube or another streaming device. And try to watch the music, listen to music, or we can say watch the videos. But try to put it with the audio in English. And if you need to, you can put the subtitles. So you can put the subtitles in either English, or if it's too difficult, you can put it in Portuguese. But then once you are able to really understand the subtitles in English, try to remove them and watch the videos without the subtitles, because this will really, really enhance your listening skills, as well as improve your level of English. Isabel says, I can drive now, but I couldn't drive 2 years ago. Good. Max says, I can play drums and guitar today. Ah, Max, very musical. Very nice. Excellent. All right, let's talk about obligations and advice. So modal verbs that we can use when talking about obligations or advice are must, should, or have to. So, for example, we use must, should, or have to say when something is necessary or unnecessary. Or we can use it to give advice. Now, let's look here. We have to be very careful because there's a difference between mustn't and don't have to. Now, mustn't means that it's not allowed. It's a bad idea. For example, I can say that you mustn't drink 10 caipirinhas. All right, it's a very bad idea. Or you mustn't drive drunk. It's not allowed, okay? Now, don't have to means that you don't need to do something, but it's fine if you want to do it. So, for example, you don't have to watch a movie without legendas. It's a good idea if you do watch the movie without the subtitles, but you don't have to. It's your preference. Max says that he couldn't speak English without confidence before studying at Seed School. Now he can. And this is not merchandising, it's a true fact. Very good, Max. We are very happy to hear it. Good example. I'm happy to hear that you guys are getting more confident speaking in English. Definitely, the more the time you take to practice, to really invest in English as a second language, the more comfortable and confident you'll get with the language. So congratulations on that. Danielle says there are too many audiobooks with images and movements in YouTube too, with or without subtitles. Yes, so there are a lot. So in this example, Danielle, we would just say a lot instead of too many. But yes, you're correct. So you can use a lot of audiobooks with images on YouTube as well, which is a very good resource. All right, so let's look here. Using have to and don't have to. So when we're talking about something positive, a very strong obligation, we can say, for example, the children have to go to school. All right? Now, if it's not an obligation, I can say I don't have to work on Sundays. So I have to work Monday to Saturday, but I don't have to work on Sundays. Now, like we saw with must and mustn't, it's a very strong obligation. I must study today, or you mustn't smoke here in the restaurant. Should or shouldn't is like a mild obligation or advice. You should save some money, or you shouldn't smoke so much. Now, I want you to tell me, what is something that you must do tonight? It must be done tonight. For example, I must take my dogs for a walk before I go to sleep. If not, then maybe they will have an accident in the house, or they're going to be so loud and annoying during the night. Maybe you hear them now as well. They're kind of playing in the room. So what is something that you must do tonight? See my little friends? Let me show you. Can you see him? So this is my friend Harley. He's a nice little dog, but he gets into a lot of trouble some nights. So what is something that you must do tonight? So Isabella asked if I have some podcast recommendations to listen to in English. Yes, so after tonight's class, I will send for you in Telegram some podcasts that you can use and that you can listen to as well, some good ones. I'll send for you in our Telegram group later on this evening. Just for the cute dog comments, they're good friends. I love dogs. They're good company. I never watched the Brazilian one. I must take a shower after my CrossFit class. Good example, Natalia. All right, excellent. Now, let's talk about permission. So, when we talk about permission, we use can, could, and may to ask for and give permission. We also use the modal verbs to say something is not allowed. For example, could I leave early today, please? Or I can say, you may not use the car tonight. So it's not allowed. You may not. Or I can ask, can we swim in the lake? So we can use can, could, or may to give advice. Now, when we talk about habits. Now, habits are a little bit more difficult, but we use will or would to talk about habits. Or we can use them to talk about things we usually do or did in the past. Would we use to express annoying habits which are typical of a person. So, for example, Tom would do something like that, wouldn't he? It's so typical of him. So, if we're talking about annoying habits, we would use would. Now, let's see here. What is a habit that your best friend would do? I want you guys to try to think about this. All right. Now, will is used to emphasize the characteristics of a person rather than describing the person himself or herself. So, a friend will always help you. So, this is one characteristic of a friend. So, if we're talking about an actual annoying habit, we use will. But if we're talking about an annoying habit, we use would. But if we're talking about a characteristic that we want to emphasize, we use will. For example, let's try to complete this phrase. A mother will ... What is something that a mother will do? For example, a mother will always protect her child. A mother will help you when you are sad. A mother will So let's see here. Max says, you must keep practicing English frequently to improve your language skills. You don't have to study every day, but the more you practice, the better you will master the language. Very well put, Max. Exactly. I agree with you 100%. Good examples. And it says, I must wear warm clothes because it is cold tonight. Yes, good. Something Edgar's friend would do, so he would go to the gym. Good. So this is very likely for him. Excellent. And it's very on track for his habits. Maybe he's very into fitness. A mother will protect her baby. Good. A mother always will be there for you. Good. In this example, Natalia, we just want to switch the will and the always. All right. So always comes after will. So a mother will always be there for you. A mother will take care of her baby. Good. Excellent job, guys. Good examples. All right, guys. So another quick class, but today a round of applause for our tech team because we didn't have any interruptions getting started. We didn't have any lags with the connection or anything like that today. So it was a very good and successful class. I want to thank you all for participating in the class. You guys brought a lot of great examples using the modal verbs. After tonight's class, I will send you the PowerPoint presentation for future reference, as well as some homework. So throughout these classes, really try to do these homework. Obviously, it's not something that is obligated or mandated, but like Max so clearly put, the more you practice, the better you will get. So I highly recommend doing the homework. Check yourself. The answers are included. If you have any questions or doubts about anything that we went over tonight, feel free to send me a message on Telegram. If you're not a part of our Telegram group yet, we will leave you the link down here in the chat box. And tonight we have another live, so if you are not following us yet on Instagram, follow us tonight at Seed Idiomas. We have another live with Kaye, the coordinator of Joma Levage, as well as Bree, who is a very, very good friend and family of some of the